So hello, everybody. Welcome to the latest in the Earn, Learn, Thrive LinkedIn Lives. And with me today, I have Paul Ashe. And Paul's been involved in different areas of ELT since 1997 as a materials writer, a teacher trainer, examiner. He's been involved in academic and business management, educational consultancy. What hasn't he done? And he's currently focusing on the area of effective live online teaching. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So let's dive straight in then, Paul, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
So I still hear people saying that online teaching is somehow just not quite as good as teaching in person and something that you should only really do if you have to. So how far would you agree with that?
Yeah, well, my take is to go the opposite way, just to sort of balance things out. But I think we all agree that, and studies have shown, there's one famous study that says something like 55% of communication is just purely visual, so body language. And therefore, if I'm trying to communicate with somebody face to face, I've got a lot more information to go on, maybe. So at the moment, you guys can only see half of me. And actually, recently, I was at a conference in the UK in Brighton, and I met somebody who I'd known online for a long time, and they said, "Oh my goodness, you have legs!" That kind of hit it, brought it home. That yes, okay, there's a certain amount of information that we kind of need, and it's useful. However, no, and as you said, my focus is effective online teaching. So as you can see, I'm not sitting down. Why? Well, for various reasons. One, because I can show you a little bit more of me, and I can communicate. I'm based in Spain, so as you can tell, I tend to talk with my hands because I've been influenced by the way they talk here, and that's very useful as well, isn't it, for transmitting information. So it depends on what you're doing online. I mean, then there are so many other things that you can do teaching online that you can't do face to face. Let me give you a small example. If I were to ask my group of students to do a writing task, if I do this face to face, I've got, let's say, 12 students and they're all writing away, and I'm looking over the shoulder of one of them, and maybe I'll correct them there, but I don't want to interfere too much because they're actually physically right. Okay, and then I'll have to give them delayed feedback, maybe collect their writings in. And okay, what about if I'm doing it online? So I give them a shared Google Doc, for example, and I allocate them a box in order to write in, and as they're typing in real time, I can add comments, I can make changes, I can highlight text, and then all I need to do is scroll down and I can see another student's writing and add text, make comments. At the same time, they can all review each other's writings and get ideas from one another. You can't do that in a face-to-face environment. So one argument is it better? Is it more effective? My argument is, well, that depends how you use it. Both, because you can get very ineffective face-to-face teaching as well as online ineffective teaching as well. So I think different ways, and I think that's probably going to lead, that comment is going to lead on to later comment as well about sort of methodology.
Yeah, no, I think that's a brilliant example, actually, of how I think it can be. I would agree with you. I think it can, do things that we just couldn't otherwise do. Just to say, if you're watching this live, do say hi in the comments, and please do feel free to put in your opinions, and your questions as well, and we'll deal with questions as they come up too. Yeah, I mean, I was simply thinking, when I posed that question about the fact that, I mean, obviously there's the convenience of working online, but I do feel sometimes people talk about how you're not building the same relationship. And I do tend to take issue with that, because I think that actually you're very sort of up close with people in a way that you're not in a classroom. You can really read people's facial expressions, I think,
yes,
much better than you can.
I think you're right. And think about, in COVID, we became experts at transmitting our feelings just through our eyebrows, if you remember, what with the masks on. So,
Yes.
we've become pretty good at reading those minimal facial expressions.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm seeing in the comments, hi, Dania, if I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, and Mohammed, hello, and Ferris. Yes, so this will be available as a replay on LinkedIn when we're finished. But obviously, if you're here live, you can ask questions live, or indeed make comments. Yes. So, okay. So going on, what does make, you're talking about the effectiveness of the teaching, whether that's in the classroom or online. What do you think makes for effective online teaching then?
It's a good question. I mean, this is the $1 million question, isn't it?
it?
Really, but what is effective teaching? Well, first of all, I would say there's two things. When the teacher has a passion for what they're doing, that automatically transmits to students. Now, I've had students who don't particularly like the subject of English. I teach mainly, now I teach online all over the world, but mainly face-to-face I've taught in Spain. So, I'll have students coming to their after-school classes of English going, my mum makes me come here, 16-year-old. But then at the same time has said to me, well, your passion, you really like what you're doing. And I said, well, no, this is a hobby for me that I get paid for. I'm very, very privileged. And something is a hobby because you enjoy doing it. And that comes through so much so that these teenagers who it's not always teenagers, could be adults or younger learners as well, who are not too keen on the subject, are actually enthused by your enthusiasm. And then that leads to, or it's an important part of the rapport, the connection that one human, the teacher, makes with another, the student. And teaching is all about that connection, which is why many experts have said, and well, we'll see what happens in the future, but AI will help teaching, but it won't substitute teachers because of the necessary human contact. Now, technology can provide asynchronous help and support and input, wonderful. But I think about any skill that you've learned, riding a bicycle, playing the guitar, whatever, just walking is a useful skill. Well, we've needed the help of another human being by our side, whether that be online or face to face, it doesn't matter, but it's another human being helping us and guiding us in order to achieve our goals sooner than were we to do the same ourselves by ourselves. So we'll still get there, but it'll just take longer. So I think it's the passion and then the connection with the other human being, basically. Now, there are lots of other things as well, obviously, just like any job. You need to know your stuff. You need to know what it is that you're doing, and you need to know how best to do it. So there's within the ELT world, we can go back in time and think about the grammar translation method, which is in part still being used effectively or not, depending on the student and the learning preferences, which is very, how do I say, the typical sage on the stage approach.
Jug and mug.
Yeah, exactly. And then if we move along a little bit towards the other end, let's put coaching, linguistic coaching, which is becoming more and more important. Well, that's the other extreme, essentially, where we're taking everything from the students or helping the students see that they have the potential to achieve their goals themselves. And we're essentially become the guide on the side instead of that sage on the stage. So with teaching online, I think this opens up an enormous opportunity for us to move away from the more traditional types of teaching which can be transferred to an online environment, but they're not ideal. And we're losing out on lots of potential there.
Yeah.
And I would suggest we should move away from the typical, the presentation, practice, production sort of type of lesson, which is very useful to have as a basis, I would suggest. When you're in your early days of teaching, right, I know the basics, I know the necessary tools, because then you can start experimenting with them. And what do all experts do? Well, they know their field, they know their tools, the tools of the trade, and then they start tweaking, experimenting, and trying different things, and out comes something slightly different.
Sure.
And that's what I'm suggesting. So I'm suggesting for online teaching, effective online teaching, we need to move away from the more traditional teaching approaches and move towards, for example, something like, well, certainly coaching techniques, something I'm researching at the moment. But also, is it SOLE, SOLE, self-organized learning environments by Sugata Mitra? That lends itself very, very well, obviously, to an online environment, because that's kind of the area.
No, I mean, I totally hear what you're saying. I mean, when I'm working with people, like on my group program, I'm constantly encouraging them to think about what do they do best, like face-to-face, online face-to-face, and what could the student actually be doing not in the lesson, and from a sort of practical business point of view, that frees things up a lot, because it means you don't have to always be there doing everything again and again and again face-to-face. There are lots of different ways of playing about with it.
Exactly. No, good point.
So we have got a few comments
questions,
and questions. Yeah. So Danny is saying online writing is way more fun and effective. Absolutely. And Paul talked about that at the beginning. Mohammed asking, how could we make the passion visible to our students?
Well, that's a good, I mean, how do you make it visible? Well, it's that if you have to make an effort to make it visible, I would suggest the passion is not completely in you. When you're really loving something and enjoying something, it will just automatically be evident. It will come out it will ooze from your pores, essentially, Now, sometimes, some people say, but isn't that, how do you say, kind of acting? And well, every teacher's personality is different, thank goodness, because that means there's a student that fits that personality. So, that's or a group of students. So everybody expresses their passion in different ways. Some might be, for example, putting lots of time and effort into preparing materials, personalized materials, including students' names in a handout or something, and then seeing their faces go, oh, that's me. Wow, brilliant. For example, I think Sri Ram Sharma has mentioned the use of gamification, which, there are lots of apps for this as well, which are useful to a certain extent, but we need to know how we're using them, and use them again effectively, which is not always easy. How making that passion visible, I would just suggest, well, when you're doing something that you are enjoying, and I think there's nothing purer than helping others as a form of enjoyment. It's a very selfish thing for me to say. I mean, I enjoy helping other people. That's why I get a buzz out of teaching. Now, that's very selfish, isn't it? Because I'm talking about me and what I like. Well, yeah, but if by the by, the secondary effects of that is that I'm helping others, wonderful. And that was one of the reasons I got into teacher training and academic management, is because, as a teacher, you go, oh, I can help my 60, 70 students a week that I have in my different classes. But then as a teacher trainer, I can help more teachers, help more students. And then as an academic manager or a school director, I can help more teachers and more students. So
the impact.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we can't underestimate. Oh God, I don't know. I think it's really important to consider the interpersonal aspect always. And that's, Mohammed's saying the trouble is when we try to speak with passion, we sometimes create stress. This is about picking up on what is happening in that space between you and the student. And that, going back to what you were saying about the coaching approach, I mean, I have a coaching diploma. I'm also a trained counsellor as well. And I think those skills, I mean, you don't have to go and learn to be a counsellor, but I think those kind of coaching skills are really important, because it is about, what's happening in that space and picking up on what works for that particular student, because some students really want you to kind of hold them accountable and push them, and other students need a much more gentle, approach, and it's kind of fitting it right, isn't it, for each student?
Exactly. It is that individual personalization. Sometimes that can be difficult, maybe at large classes, and you think, but little things can be done. I think the important thing for me is the being aware of the baggage that students bring with them into the room. And I don't mean just those heavy bags that full of books that they need for their, it's the psychological baggage. So this is where I prefer the face-to-face. Because as soon as my students walking through the door, I'm reading their body language. What type of day have they had? What sort of mindset are they in? Are they open to learning? And I have to read all that in with within seconds, really. So lots of body language reading going on there as well. I mean, one of my hobbies is people watching, sitting at the cafe and just sort of looking. Not that I have any time to do it, but enjoy watching the world go past and just try to imagine, well, I wonder what they do. I wonder, again, it's just something to do as a way of disconnecting. But thank you, Elizabeth. The reading of the students, reading of the room, how is it going? Well, my first step is always make sure they're in the right frame of mind, and then start your teaching, because it's pointless otherwise. And I've had students come in very angry, and not angry with me. It's just that maybe they've had an argument just before. It happened to one particular 16-year-old had an argument with mum and dad about something that is none of my business. And I said, just breathe, stop. Remember, you're not angry with me because I've got nothing to do with what happened just before you come in. I realize you're angry. Take your time. Do you want to talk about it? He mentioned something. He did say something. His friends in the room then sort of gave him some advice, whatever. He saw things in a different perspective, and he calmed down. And I said, right, are you ready? You sure? Should we get you? Yeah, thank you. Sorry about my kind of stormy entrance. Now learning can happen. And this is, I think Stephen Krashen talks about the affective filter. It's a little bit like I always compare it to the window of a car. The higher the filter, so the higher the stress levels, and stress can be produced for different reasons. Could be because the students are too cold, too hot, they're thinking about the football matches is about to start, before the end of the lesson. So, or whatever, it doesn't matter. The higher that filter, well, the less that is going to come in, the less learning is going to happen. So it's our job, and we're not, well, Rachel is, but we're not all qualified, to be psychologists and sociologists or not, but we are dealing with other human beings. So
I think teachers are generally very empathetic in my experience. I think in a way, to want to be a teacher, you kind of have those skills, built in. And it is sometimes a question of just, learning to kind of trust that as much as anything. I mean, I'm looking at, because Camilla asked a question about, particularly shy students who find presentations really difficult. And that's absolutely the affective filter, because the affective filter is up so high that they just can't kind of focus on what it is that they're supposed to be doing. I mean, another way of looking at that is it's like their fight, flight, freeze, kicks in. And we know that actually stops you from using the logical part of your brain. Like you just go straight into, like rabbit
Yeah.
in headlights, as they say. So, yeah, so I mean, do you have any practical things that you might do to help with that, to help kind of lower that affective
It's a
filter?
good point. Well, and this is where we're coming back to methodologies and so. So, for example, if it's an institutional obligation that students give presentations in front of their peers, and just think how scary that is. I don't know about you, but just talking now to Rachel, it's lovely because she's very calming or whatever. But just the thought, if I were to see the people in front of me all viewing this, I'd be panicking a lot more than I already am. You know, so and I've been teaching for 27 years. So the fear never disappears, and that's good. It's a sign of, that supposedly that you're a professional, you want to do things well. That's why we get scared, because we want to do it well. Now, give the same task to a 14-year-old, 15, 16-year-old, or younger or older, and they've never done this before. It's not normal for a 14, 15, 16-year-old to, give talks in front of large groups of people. Now, if it's an institutional obligation, well, then the teacher has to do it. If it's not, could you not negotiate another way that they could do the same thing and find something that suits them? Perfect example is, and I'm going to be very honest now, I've been studying Chinese for the last 2 years. I will admit that probably the worst students are teachers. I'm talking completely for myself here, okay? So I freeze in exams. I get a mental block. And the same happens when I'm playing Trivial Pursuit, because you have to, you're under very tight pressure to answer a question. And I don't know, there's something in my brain that just, I freeze, because I'm very shy. And I was painfully shy as a child. I mean, I'd be even too shy to talk to my own cousins. That would show you the level of shyness there. So exam pressure just makes me go blank. So recently I had an exam in Chinese, and I looked at the paper, and I just looked at the paper for 30 minutes. And I said to the teacher, I'm sorry, if you were to have spoken to me and asked me these questions and we'd had a chat, I said, I probably could have answered you without a problem. Well, I certainly wouldn't have been perfect. But asking me to write it, okay, writing in Chinese is a whole different world as well. But asking me to write it there on the spot and under this pressure, and everybody else is, writing away, and I'm looking at them thinking, oh, I'm not writing anything. That just mounted up. And so I said, no, my mental health is more important. And somebody, I think, touched upon this in the comments. So as regards the creation of, speaking with passion, we sometimes create stress. So, so I've got to the point, well, okay, I'm going to look after my mental health here. And I just won't do the exam. And I'll say, sorry, that type of assessment does not suit the way I learn.
Sure.
Now, sorry about that. I've failed. If that means I failed, fine. But
I think, because I know Camilla anyway, but she's, she's helping adults who have to give presentations as part of their job.
Oh,
so,
okay, right.
So, it's not necessarily,
adults,
something that you cannot do. But I mean, for me, I would say the reason you found that hard, from what you're telling us, is that was a sort of totally alien scenario that you suddenly got plopped into, and your fight, flight, freeze just
exactly.
So exactly. I think I would say just building it up gradually, breaking it down into small bits, and just getting comfortable with those small things. Because if you people talk a lot about pushing people out of their comfort zone, and all that happens if you push someone out of their comfort zone is that they panic, and it just kind of, they zip back into where it feels safe.
Well, it's that was it zone of proximal development, isn't
exactly.
it? It's that fine section there of slightly out of your comfort zone, but so you can feel a little bit uncomfortable, but certainly not scared.
Exactly. It's about that level, isn't it? So I would always talk about stretching the comfort zone rather
Yeah,
than pushing
that's a
somebody out
nicer
of
way to
it.
put it. Exactly. Nice,
And
nice and
that's what I think you have to do. That would be my advice, Camilla, is to think about ways to just stretch that comfort zone in small ways until they feel able to do it.
And breaking it down, I think, there's, marginal gains is
Yeah.
used lots in coaching as well. That 1%. So imagine they first of all, they just say their 2-minute introduction to their talk,
Yeah.
and they give it to, they say it to 2 people who are standing there looking. Then
Exactly.
they repeat it again to 5 people, and then 10 people. Oh, okay, so that's only your 2-minute introduction. There, we got that out of the way. And what about now? Let's try the introduction and then the next part. Yeah, as you say, building it up.
Yeah, just it's that how do you eat an elephant, isn't it? One bite at a time.
One by that.
So okay, so we're coming up to the end of the half hour. Amazingly, it always goes so quickly. So just looking at the comments, yeah, lovely, thank you, Nelson. And I think just looking at this, yeah. So oh God, so many questions here. So Nigar, if that's how you pronounce it, yes, introverts should also be recognised and appreciated like extroverts. Yeah, totally. Speaking as an introvert, and it sounds like you might be too, Paul.
Yes, I am. Yep.
So yeah, absolutely. I think it is all again about understanding as much as we can about how people work. I think.
Yeah, and I think this is where maybe academic managers play a role, or if we are teaching our own students, is it's very typical that we do a kind of a needs analysis before we teach them. Okay, that needs analysis must also include, well, how do you want to learn? What do you want me to do to make you feel more comfortable? What are your learning preferences? And that's going to dictate then maybe the methodology that I choose. So we are as English teachers, people who wear, or teachers in general, many hats. Before I mentioned that idea of, well, the grammar translation method, and then moving over in the Klein to coaching. Well, in any one lesson, we might take on different roles within a 40, 50, 60-minute lesson, and we're different people at different times. You mentioned, yes, we are the psychologist, the mother, the father, the the stern uncle or aunt, or it really depends. So we are moving lots and adapting to lots of different types, I think.
No, absolutely. So tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing at the moment on effective teaching online, just to round up.
Yeah, what I've been doing is analyzing setups. So I'm asking teachers, show me your online setup, and I've sort of taken the list of the ideal setup based on lots of different people's, and you see that basically the reason for that, because it's the beginning, is looking after the teacher well-being. So for example, you can see I'm standing up. I've invested in a table that moves up and down, so I can sit up and sit up. I can stand up even and sit down. Yeah, my English, sorry. So this is helping me feel healthier. I'm actually more productive as well in doing so. I would also then tell students, listen, don't sit in a hardback chair for 60 minutes. If you're online, well, stand up. Best way to do it, if you're teaching, you don't have to invest in anything. You probably have an ironing board. The ironing board moves it up and down. Now you have a table that, with a laptop underneath it, nobody can see that you have an ironing board there, but you've got a table that moves up and down. So one thing is looking at the well-being of the teacher. The other thing is looking at the well-being of the student as well. And I think that's very important. And then researching, at the moment, I'm researching the use of coaching techniques and teacher training courses, with the idea of helping teachers use those to help their students as well.
That sounds really interesting. So the link to your website is in the description of our talk. So do pop over and have a look at
English
what Paul
training
is
online.
doing. And thank you so much, everybody who's been here live. And if you do have any other questions, or if you're watching this on replay and you have any other questions, pop them in the comments, because Paul and I can come back and have a look at the comments afterwards. And thank you very much, Paul. Fascinating conversation to have with you.
Enjoyed it.
And see you all again soon.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.